Wonderful. So,
Well, good morning.
hello. So, hello everyone. I'm glad to welcome you all to the fifth and last edition of our Restoration Community Talks in 2022. And we are super happy that so many people had the time to come together today, not only now, but also in the early session in our morning. And so I'm Max, and I have the pleasure to be one of your hosts today. So some of you already know me, some not. So I'm the main focal point of contact at Plant for the Planet when it comes to joining the Plant for the Planet platform. And it's so fantastic to see that you're here and have take the time. So again, the Plant for the Planet platform is our contribution to the decade on ecosystem restoration. And we are very proud and grateful to be to support this constantly growing movement across the globe. Since 2019, we have facilitated more than 86 million trees through our platform, and the numbers are constantly growing. And to provide you with the best support and to ensure that you can make the best use out of our platform and for your work, we're striving for improvements and for your feedback at any time. So that's also a reason why we come together today. Long story short, today we have set the following agenda. So now we have already almost passed the introduction. We will then give you a quick update on the web app technology improvements of our platform. We also would like to introduce you the project advisory service Plant for the Planet is offering. And afterwards, we have a special guest joining our talk tonight, and it's Mr. Stuart Pym. He's the founder of Saving Nature, and he will give us a short presentation with the topic of about restoring connections in nature is the most effective way to stop species extinctions. And in the end, we should have enough time for a question and answer section. So to close today's talk. So to ensure a smooth and respectful interaction during these sessions, we would like you to mute yourself during the presentations by clicking on the microphone icon. If possible, signal your contributions with the raise your hand function in the participants panel. Please turn off your camera when speaking to make the session more interactive. Turn on your camera when speaking to make the session more interactive. And whenever you have a question, either post it in the chat or ask them directly after the presentation or at the question and answer section in the end. So thank you very much. And we have this special guest. I already introduced you, Stuart. I would like you to speak a few words to our audience, who you are and why are you here with us today?
Thank you. Well, I'm here in part because you are very kind in supporting the tree planting activities that my group is doing. My day job, as it were, is I'm a professor of conservation. I hold the Doris Duke Chair of Conservation at Duke University. But I also run a rapidly growing nonprofit called Saving Nature. And we help people around the world acquire land and plant trees there. And I'm going to be talking about the science behind that. I'm going to be talking about what's going on in Montreal with COP15. And thank you for, asking me to join you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And then I think we can directly jump into the first topic. I would like to hand over to Matthias, my colleague from the development department at Plant for the Planet, and he will give you a short introduction and about the improvements of our platform.
Hey, I'm Matthias. Thank you for handing over, Max, and nice introductions. I'm gonna give you a quick glimpse into a new technology that we have been working on, which is called Planet Cash. So it's like Plan for the Planet, just with lots of cash and money. And the idea behind Planet Cash is that it is a virtual currency, which means that it's not an actual currency that any country is using. It's our Plan for the Planet own virtual currency. And the way it works is that user can give money to Plan for the Planet, and then they get Planet Cash in return. Whenever they look into their profile, they can see you have this and that much Planet Cash. So if they give us like 10 euro, they get 10 euro in Planet Cash. It's one-to-one. We don't take like any transaction fees or anything like that. And then at any later point, this user can spend this Planet Cash and make payments to any of the projects on our platform. So if you're a restoration organization, users can use the Planet Cash that they received in step 1 and make a donation to one of your projects. But you won't receive any virtual currency. You can't plant any trees from that and restore ecosystems from that. What you receive instead is the actual money that Plan for the Planet received in step 1. So we will pay you out the money, just like normal in our normal app payouts to you. So this is 3 very easy steps. A user gives money to Plan for the Planet, gets Planet Cash in return. Then they can spend parts of the Planet Cash to make transactions to different projects, and Plan for the Planet will pay out the actual money that they received in step 1 to the restoration organizations of those projects. This has multiple benefits. There are 2 main ones, that the user only has to make one initial money transfer, and then can make multiple transactions with the money transfer at different points of time. That lowers transaction costs. It also helps with companies, because for companies it's easier within company bureaucracy to get everything signed to make one money transfer to Plan for the Planet. And then instead of making like 10 different ones over the year, if they want to make 10 transactions, that would be a hassle for them given company bureaucracy. But the bigger benefit in our eyes is that Planet Cash can be used by computers. Usually it's hard for a computer to use actual money, because you might have experienced this whenever you're using money on a computer. There's a human interaction. You have to provide some human bank details or a signature, or have to use like a 10 generator or something like that, or you get something to your cell phone and have to identify yourself. So usually there's a human element when using money via computers. This gets circumvented with Planet Cash. Computers can just use it. They can just send us a little message, and then Planet Cash gets used. That means that you can automate this process of using Planet Cash. And for example, you could set up a software where you write a user, not a restoration organization usually. Some user or some company writes a little code, gives this code a list of birthdays of their customers, let's say 500 birthday dates and the customer names. And then the software sends out a request to use Planet Cash to make a tree gift to the customer on their birthday. And so all year long, whenever there's a birthday of a customer, the computer can just spend Planet Cash to make them a tree gift. So that's really good for partners and everyone. It's an open API, so everyone can use this. It's really good for people that know a little bit about software development, because then they can automate tree gifting according to their own needs, which is only possible because it's a virtual currency. There's more information here under this link. There's a whole explanation and what a computer has to send to our servers. to actually spend the virtual currency Planet Cash. But yeah, that's the gist of it. For restoration organization, not much changes. You just receive actual money like before. You don't receive any virtual currency or anything like that. Don't worry about that. And Plan for the Planet doesn't keep any parts of it. It just gets the money, turns it into Planet Cash one-to-one, and then in the end pays out the actual money that it received in step one. And yeah, there's no transaction fees or anything. So it's just we are making our fundraising platform. That's the main thing. We are making our fundraising platform more interesting for companies, especially companies that have a little bit of software development on their side, because then they can automate with our platform instead of having to make like manual donations every time they want to plant some trees. And because of our fundraising platform being more interesting for them, there should be more donations coming towards our projects and our platform. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat and or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'd hand over back to Max to introduce our next talker. Okay, I'd hand over to Max then.
Thank you very much, Matthias. So you already heard that Planet Cash is just a feature on our platform that is mainly relevant for corporate partners. And we believe that all projects on our platform greatly will benefit from that feature. I'm also happy to introduce you to Dr. Caxton Gitango Kawa. He's the lead of our project advisory team. We recently established a Plan for the Planet. Now I would like to hand over to you, Caxton. Please introduce yourself and give us a brief overview of what we are offering now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Max. Yes, as I said, my name is Caxton Gitango Kawa. I'm the lead of the restoration advice at Plan for the Planet. As he's saying, it's a restoration advice project that is has already started at the Plan for the Planet. The essence of it, what we are doing is that we are advising restoration projects from around the world. These may be restoration projects that are within the Plan for the Planet platform that want to join the platform, or any other projects out there that may not be associated with the Plan for the Planet, but are undertaking forest landscape restoration work. So there's an advisory team. It is made up of experts, mainly ecologists, who are experts in matters of forest landscape restoration, and they are from various parts of the world. But you also have intentions of growing the team so that we have a network of advisors from around the world. Because we like a situation whereby if someone from a certain country asks for advice for ISOLAB or for their project, then even after offering the advice, then even someone who is near that person can also be able to give further advice in order to make sure that the advice that we are offering is at a final scale and is really aligned to the local context where the project is taking place. We advise on various issues that are related to forest landscape restoration. Some of them include the selection of the right species to plant in the target landscapes, because we like people when they are restoring their landscapes to restore these landscapes with an intention of taking them back or bringing them back to their original status, to how the primary forest of these areas really looked like. So one of the advice that we are offering is as it pertains to species selection, and also guiding them on how they can other methods that they can also use to identify the species. For example, also taking advantage of knowledge that is within their communities, because we have especially indigenous communities, people who are very knowledgeable on the various species that used to exist in these areas. Also guiding them on issues of silvicultural practices, for example, the planting of trees, the maintenance of these trees after they have been planted, even things like the collection of scenes, the treatment of scenes, how they can be able to manage the scenes and even store them, all operations that revolve around tree planting, and also matters to do with site identification, so they can be able to even to properly identify sites. Also, because for example, to put considerations of even aspects, other aspects, for example, like the issues of land tenure, because the trees also need tenure to make sure that the project is sustainable. So these are the kind of the restoration advice has started, and we have advised a number of projects, and the advisory process is going on. But I think by now we have advised over 10 projects that are in different countries in Africa, DRC Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, some of them are in Tanzania, and various other countries. And as the restoration advice is going on, I'm seeing there's a lot of interest. People are really coming in for the advice, and that is really helping them. I've seen even the project documents are really improving as the advice goes on, because some of these people have very nice initiatives, but the problem, some of them may be unable to document them properly, to package them properly in a project document in order to get support from the donors. So we are also even advising them on the conceptualization of these, how they can conceptualize their projects better, how they can even communicate their goals and objectives better, such things that the development of the project itself, and also the implementation of the project, the initial processes, and even later processes, even how they can exit their projects. Thank you very much. That is what we are doing as a restoration projects advisory team. Thank you. I hand it over back to Max.
Thank you, Caxton. Is there anyone who has a question already to Caxton? I would like to add that it's not only about advising projects to be part of our platform. We offer this service to any restoration expert or project in the world that would like to ask questions. So we are more than happy to receive your emails. We can, after the call, we will make a follow-up and share with you also the contact details of the advisory service. So now, if there is no other question, I would like to come to the next part of our call, and I would like to hand over to Stuart, who would like to give you a short presentation about what Saving Nature and what he's doing.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me here to talk to you. I'm going to talk about planting trees, but in the context of preventing species extinctions. I mean, as we talk, more than 100 nations around the world are meeting for COP15 in Montreal, the joint meeting between China and Canada, originally scheduled for Kunming. And this biodiversity meeting has as one of its aims to stop the loss of biodiversity. I want to bring you up to speed where we are in protecting biodiversity, and tell you the really vital, important news that what we do in planting trees, if we plant them in the right places, can have a very, very effective impact on slowing the rate of extinction. So I want to consider sort of three questions. How are we doing at meeting biodiversity targets? How did we do in protecting the targets that were established a decade ago? What will COP15's aspiration be? Well, they told us that they want to protect 30% of the planet. How well have we achieved that up to date? And how can we do better? And there we go, that's better. And we'll see that protecting large areas just for the sake of it isn't the best solution. We need to be clever, we need to be smart, and we need to plant our trees in the right places. So what do we know about biodiversity? We know that human actions are driving species to extinction 1,000 times faster than they would go extinct normally. Al Gore, in An Inconvenient Truth, tells us that. Where did Al Gore get that from? Well, he got it from me and my colleagues in a paper we published 20 odd years ago and have updated since. Now, I have to tell you, of course, I was flattered that Al Gore quoted my work, but I'm even more thrilled by this young woman shown in this photograph, who is holding up a sign that says extinction rate up 1,000-fold. One day, I'm hoping that I will give a talk, and this young woman will be in the audience, because I will buy her a very nice bottle of wine. You know, it's one thing to have politicians talk about your work, but my work has never been featured in a street demonstration until this time, and I am very, very honored to be part of one. So we're driving species to extinction very quickly. So given that, how well are we doing to protect biodiversity? I'm going to tell you that we're protecting biodiversity pretty well, but we need to be careful how we go forward, and we need to be careful to be smart in how we go forward. This is a map of the planet, and it shows in green where the protected areas are. It also classifies the planet into places that I call wilderness, for want of a better phrase. These are shown in yellow. And there are places like, you know, the Arctic, the Tibetan Plateau, the Sahara, places where few people live. The areas shown in green are where there is heavy human impact. And we've arbitrarily defined the planet into these two areas, wilderness and high impact. So we can begin to look at what would happen if we try to protect half of the world. Would it benefit biodiversity? Do we need more wild places? Do we need to expand protected areas into places with few people? It's the easier thing to do politically. Well, here is the world's largest national park. I've been there in the sense that I have flown over it. It's the northern quarter of Greenland. Now, you notice that there aren't any trees there. In fact, I don't think there's much biodiversity there at all. I've never been there on the ground. I suspect there are polar bears and musk ox, and that's about it, but definitely no trees. So, you know, I don't know whether the European Union is very proud of how much land it's protected, but, you know, protecting big chunks of Greenland isn't going to help biodiversity. If we look in a simplified way about how we've protected the planet, we see that about 13% of the land surface is protected. It's mostly in the 50% of the land surface that's wilderness, and not in the other 50%, which has a lot of people. So we're putting our protected areas where people aren't. So how well are we protecting species by doing this? Well, let's sort of consider the null hypothesis. Supposing we have a species that has a huge geographical range. I've selected this species of insect. By chance alone, we'd expect half of its range to be in wilderness and half of its range to be in places where there are a lot of people, and 13% of its range to be protected. That's to be expected. What happens if we look at species with really tiny geographical ranges? Those species are much more likely to be threatened with extinction. So here we are, here are 6 species of unicorn. Now, you might think, well, I haven't seen the species of unicorn, and neither have I, but I'm suggesting that out there, unknown to us, are these very, very rare species of unicorns. And we would expect by chance that 13%, 1/6 of the unicorns would be in a protected area, and half would be in wilderness and half would not be. So again, on average, we expect 13% of species ranges to be protected, and half and half in wilderness and other areas. If we look at species of vertebrates where we can map the ranges well, we see that this is about what we expect, that 13% of species near enough that have ranges of more than 1 million square kilometers, 13% are protected. If we were to expand protected areas to 50% of the planet, then we'd end up with about 50% protection. It's pretty much what we expect. The question is, what happens for species that have really small geographical ranges? And we see that, surprisingly, the world species that have small geographical ranges are much better protected than you'd expect. Somewhere between, 30% and 80% of the most vulnerable species are protected by our network of protection. Interestingly, that expanding that network to wilderness areas doesn't buy you much. It doesn't really help you very much. So, how are we doing at meeting biodiversity targets? We're actually doing a lot better than you might think. All of these species, the skywalker gibbon, the glittering star frontlet, the golden snub-nosed monkey, Cassidy horns, a poison dart frog, all those species have small ranges and they're all protected. The problem is that by protecting species with small ranges, with small national parks, that may not be enough to guarantee their survival. So how can we do better? How can we take what we know about biodiversity and protect areas better? Part of it is we need to know where to act strategically. And then the other part is, once we know where the key areas are, we need to know how to act tactically.
We can map out the distribution of many species now in considerable detail. These are birds, and they show that the warm, wet tropics are where most of the species are. And mammals show a broadly similar pattern. These are the places with the greatest concentration of species, and it's likely to be true for most species. Amphibians, for example, show a similar pattern, and while we have less detail for plants, it's almost certainly true for them too. But just looking at species is not sufficient. We need to dig deeper. Let's look again at the distribution of bird species. In the Amazon, there are the greatest numbers of species. But if we look at where species have smaller than the median range size, those distributions are profoundly different. They're concentrated in Central America and in the northern Andes, and in places like the coastal forests of Brazil.
So if we zoom in on Brazil for a moment, if we look at where threatened bird species are in South America, there are a lot of threatened bird species in coastal Brazil and in the northern Andes. If we look at Brazil, the concentration of amphibians with small ranges, the concentration of mammals with small ranges, are all in the Mata Atlântica, the coastal forests. So this tells us that's a place we need to go and look at so we can come up with not just a strategic knowledge of where species are, but a tactical understanding of what we need to do next. This is a stitched together map of satellite imagery for coastal Brazil. Right in the middle is the city of Rio de Janeiro. When I first showed this map to my Brazilian colleagues, the first thing they wanted to do was zoom in on it and see the football stadium in Maracanã. And I have to tell you that all of my Brazilian colleagues at the moment are crying. They are absolutely I can do nothing to console them. To have been kicked out of the World Cup at this early stage is just so embarrassing. Of course, England's been kicked out too. So if we look at, this map, it's sort of clear that yes, there's some forest, but there's a lot of areas that aren't forest. So let's zoom in. Let's look at that piece. And this is a color enhanced version of that map. And the thing you see immediately is that yes, there's a lot of forest, but a lot of that forest is in small pieces, it's in fragments. And we can do something about that. We can take out the small fragments. There we go. Going backwards and forwards from those two images, you can see that there's a great deal of forest that's in small patches. Let's take a look at that from, in this case, a helicopter. If we look at that area, you see that there is a lot of the landscape that's small, isolated patches of forest. And that's a clue to what we need to do next. If we look at where the concentrations of species are, we see that about 100 kilometers east of the city of Rio de Janeiro is Reserva União, the Union Biological Reserve. And it's a forest island, at least it was. It's an area that is isolated from the other forests. We know from the work of the late Tom Lovejoy what happens to species in forests. Tom, 40 years ago, working in the Amazon, set up what I think is the most important ecological experiment ever conducted, which was to create a set of experimental populations and follow the rate at which species are lost. That's what the area looks like from a satellite, patches of different sizes, 1, 10, 100, 10,000 hectares. And he followed the rate of species loss in those fragments. And what we know from these studies is that small fragments lose species faster than large fragments, and they lose more of them. So small is bad. And combining this with work done by my former graduate student, Tom Brooks, now the chief scientist at IUCN, we have shown a result that is actionable conservation science, that fragments have to be about 10,000 hectares, 100 square kilometers, if we are to slow the rate of species losses. I cannot stress this result enough. We have to create landscapes where forests are connected, that are sufficiently large that the species within them can maintain viable populations. That's something that requires us to plant trees.
We identify the places where the greatest number of species are at risk of extinction. And when we do that, we often find they're in very fragmented landscapes. They're not in large areas of continuous forest like the Amazon, but they're in the biodiversity hotspots, and those places have already lost a lot of their habitats. A good example of this is in the forest to the east of the city of Rio de Janeiro in coastal Brazil. This map shows the fragments and the number of threatened species that they contain. We have not just merely destroyed so much of the world's tropical forests,
what we have left behind is in tatters, in fragments. And those fragments are often too small for species to maintain viable populations. There just aren't enough males to go around for the females and females to go around for the males. And of all the places, all the fragments, one that I thought was particularly tragic was the one immediately behind me. This is the Union Biological Reserve in coastal Brazil, about 100 miles east of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Because in this isolated patch of forest are a whole load of species on the brink of extinction, the most charismatic of which is a beautiful little monkey called the golden lion tamarin. And the golden lion tamarins in that fragment could not go forth and multiply into the forest over there because there was the cattle pasture behind me. And when I saw that cattle pasture for the first time about 8 years ago, a cattle pasture just like the one I'm standing in, I thought it has to go. And so we have made it go away. This is a restored forest. I helped raise money for my friends at the Asociação Mico Leão Dourado, the Golden Lion Tamarin Association. I've planted this forest and it now connects that once isolated fragment of forest in the Union Biological Reserve to a much larger area of forest over in this direction. It's what we call a biological corridor. And it means that the golden lion tamarins that were once imprisoned in this forest island, this forest fragment behind me, can now cross through these small but growing trees and go and find new habitats, new homes, new places for their tamarin families.
So that's what it looked like in about 2007. A cattle pasture, very severely degraded. It wasn't very good for growing cattle. We were able to raise the funds to give to our Brazilian colleagues to buy that property. Within about 5 years, that's what it looked like. You can see the trees coming up. And that's what it looked like about 3 years ago. I mean, it's now a very, very lush area of forest. So yes, I mean, I know with what you are doing worldwide, you have stories like this. But this is more than just planting trees. It's planting trees strategically to reconnect landscapes so the species in them are viable. So let me take you to one more place, which is the Northern Andes, to a site in Colombia at La Amazônia. It was where I got to meet Samantha earlier this year. It's also an area of extraordinary biological diversity. It's also massively fragmented. You can sort of see that the hillsides have been cleared. And there's some of our trees on the back of a mule about to be taken off and planted. The fact that we are being blessed by this statue of St. Francis seems entirely appropriate to me. And again, it's a matter of planting trees to reconnect the landscape. The area on the right is about 100,000 hectares. It's isolated. It's isolated from the forest to the west, to the left, which is where the main Andean chain is. And so what we are doing is we are beginning to reforest those areas. To do that, we need everybody. We need, obviously, money, and we're grateful to your support to plant trees, but we need to involve everyone in the local community.
Como habitante de los sectores de influencia de la Reserva Natural Mesenia Paramillo, ahí paro. Esa parte es importante porque uno de los compromisos que nosotros hicimos es que queríamos sobre todo beneficiar a la gente que está cerca de la reserva o que interactúa con la reserva de alguna manera. Esto no es
Buenos días, soy Noelia Jaramillo, vivo en la vereda La Mesenia. Toda mi vida siempre he vivido por acá. Soy ama de casa, tengo mi esposo, mis tres hijos, pero en este momento pertenezco al vivero comunitario Vereda La Mesenia. Me metí en este proyecto con los arbolitos, me parece espectacular, me gusta mucho trabajar con la naturaleza. Entonces ahora se nos presenta y aquí vamos para adelante.
This effort is something that is really community-driven, family-driven. So, you know, the women in the village are there with their children and they're collecting seeds and germinating them and putting them into the pots and getting them to a reasonable size. Their husbands are up on the hillside where we're planting trees. They're working the augers and putting the trees in the ground. This year alone, we planted 120,000 trees at just this one site. So this is tree planting, yes, but it's tree planting with a strategic purpose. We're reconnecting nature. Importantly, we're also giving species the chance not just to move, but to move upslope, because we know as the climate warms, we're going to have to allow species to move to cooler climes. So what do we do at Saving Nature? Well, we have projects in Brazil, 4 of them, 2 in Colombia, 3 in Ecuador, 2 in India, 2 new ones in Tanzania, including one in the Usambara Mountains, and one in the northern part of Sumatra. And so with that, thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for your support.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for this wonderful presentation. Is there anyone who has a question to Stuart and his presentation now? Yeah, Matthias has one.
I think I understood the benefits it has if, for example, apex predators get reintroduced into an area where they used to already roam and live, and the food chain gets restored. But what about if you have an area that is secluded and, for example, in New Zealand, where it was mostly birds, and then it gets connected to an area where there's an invasive species. Would it still be a good idea to connect us?
I mean, you're right, it would not be. But the challenge in places like New Zealand is that the conservation scientists there have done an extraordinary job to protect biodiversity by building very, very effective predator fences, or at least fences to keep out invasive species. They're not all predators. But are those populations big enough? Are those populations viable enough? And my New Zealand colleagues are fully aware of that, and they've got to make the fragments big enough and sustainable enough. And that probably means, you know, first of all, protecting individual fragments and then eventually connecting them up. Where we work, those kind of invasive species are not the major problem. The major problem is that we lose the top predators. We lose South America, we lose panthers, we lose jaguars. And when that happens, you get an overabundance of middle-sized predators, and those middle-sized predators do an enormous amount of harm. So are we worried about the food chain consequences of what we do? Absolutely. But invasive species are not the major concern for us in the projects that we're dealing with.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Matthias? Okay, wonderful. Is there anyone else who would like to ask Stuart something? Caxton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful presentation, and it's very true. And I've seen a lot of organizations. They are really starting to inform their conservation activities with this concept, whereby now you focus on the areas that are very important for conservation of these species that are of conservation concern. But what we realize is that most of these patches of forest that we are talking about, especially in areas where we have indigenous communities, when we ask ourselves what really informed the realization of these communities, even as they were degrading all the other areas, deforesting all the other areas, what really informed their decision not to destroy that particular patch, because it must have been informed by something, by a certain factor. One thing that we will observe, some of these places are of cultural importance. For example, in Kenya, we shall hear of places like the Arabuko Sukoke forest, which is the conservation of this area is not because for the local community, it was not informed because of Abaling being an habitat for a certain species of conservation concern, but it's because of the sacred aspect, that cultural aspect. I know of a forest here in Kenya also. I'll give examples of Kenya where I am and where I'm more conversant with. There's Embu County in Kenya. We have a small forest called the Kirimeri Forest. It's a forest hill actually, and that place is very intact. And what has always informed, even traditionally, the conservation of this particular place is the importance of that forest to the agriculture activities in the surrounding areas, because the Embu people of that area believe that what makes that area to be very productive agriculturally and to have a lot of rainfall is because of that specific forest. So they have always conserved it and made sure that that forest is not touched. Some people may have conserved their forest because of a certain animal, a wild animal, that they thought was sacred or of certain cultural importance. But now, in this approach, our main focus is as scientists, what do we refer, what kind of biodiversity, or what kind of fauna, or what kind of flora and fauna do we think, based on maybe certain processes, is to us of maybe conservation concern, maybe is under the threat of getting extinct, or is endangered, or is threatened. That is what is informing the choice of the areas that are going to be conserved. And this approach is getting a lot of influence, because right now it is actually informing the conservation agenda, the current conservation agenda, and even into the future, especially the conservation of biodiversity. And it means these are the areas where the conservation funding will really, a lot of conservation funding, these are the areas that have been identified through this process. These are the areas that will be the focus of conservation funding, even into the future. So there may be other areas that are of cultural importance, and there are other areas that will be of agricultural importance, and that have been conserved based on these decisions. And these are the decisions that lend even to the conservation of the areas that we are planning to conserve because of the harboring these species of conservation concern that may be assumed, or that may require certain terms of support. So I'm wondering how can such issues be dealt with? Because I've even been trying to follow about this process, and I've seen other people who are also having similar concerns. How can some of these issues be addressed?
I have one of the most important qualifications as a
Yeah.
conservation scientist.
Yeah.
I'm British.
Yeah.
And Britain, no country in the world has interfered with more countries for longer than Britain has. We are absolutely the world's worst at interfering with other countries. And the lesson that teaches me is that I can't come in and tell a local community what to do. And I think that many big conservation groups make mistakes because they do. So what we do at Saving Nature is we respond to what local communities ask. So we wouldn't, I mean, we're coming into 2 projects in Tanzania, and I will be there in a month's time. The reason we're going there is that the local communities have asked for our help. They've asked for us to help them plant trees and restore connections. We work with local communities when they ask us to help them. And I think a lot of the mistakes in conservation are this sort of colonial attitude that we're going to tell you how to do things locally. So I totally understand that many places are important. They could be sacred. They could be traditional sites for all sorts of reasons. And it's wrong for us to try and interfere. It doesn't work in the long run. So I founded Saving Nature so I could have an organization that would be receptive to the requests and the needs of local communities. There's an expression in America that all politics is local, that politicians have to take care of the needs of the local communities. The same is true of conservation. All conservation is local. And if the conservation doesn't work for the local community, it's not going to work at all.
I also have a quick question, Stuart. Hello. Thank you for the...
I saw you this morning and I didn't have a chance to say hello. I hope you were well.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Really interesting. I have just a quick question. I agree that it's really important to connect the different patches. My question is more related to ask if, because you mentioned the 100 kilometers squares, I think that's like kind of like in total, the area you mean to be kind of functional. And my question is more related that if you did some study or like if you measure like the minimum area of each patch to be kind of like functional and to avoid like the border effects for different animals to know like, yeah, if there's like a minimum area that you have seen that works until that point or not anymore.
We think that 100 square kilometers is a minimum size. Can we always achieve that? No. And there are some places where that's going to be easy, like at La Amazônia in Colombia, at the project site I showed you in Brazil. There are other places where the fragments are much smaller, and we have to try and connect a few, and then more, and then more. Do I worry about the edge effects? Yes, we know that the edges of the forest are bad places. They're dry. You get a high tree mortality there. But we do our best to stitch together forest fragments by planting native trees so that we can create viable landscapes for species.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there any other question to Stuart or to other topics we've talked about today? If not, I think we should come to an end because we already exceeded our time. I would like to thank you all, and especially Stuart and Caxton for your presentations. It was really nice to have you in our community talks today. And if someone is interested in further insight of what Stuart and your colleagues of Saving Nature are doing, please drop us a message. We are happy to connect you. I hope that's okay with you, Stuart. We would like to continue with this format. And as you know, Plant for the Planet platform is a fundraising platform, but we also have always the chance to see some other funding or fundraising opportunities we would like to share with you. Currently, there are 2 calls for proposals open to projects related to restoration and conservation. I'm not sure. Yeah, here you can see it. It's called the ICI Small Grants Call for Proposals. It's still open until mid of March 23, and it has a grant size up to $200,000. And in addition, there's the GEF Small Grants Program, which is a bit smaller with a maximum grant size of $50,000. If someone is interested, we will share the links where you can apply to in a follow-up email after our calls. So you don't have to write them down now. Last but not least, we also have would like to encourage you to participate in the survey we already mentioned in the last talks in September, but it's still open, and our friends at the ETH Zurich, the Crowther Lab, are more than happy to get more insight of your work, your challenges, and so forth.
I gotta go. Goodbye, everybody. Good night.
Goodbye, Stuart. So I see there's one more question, Luis. Thank you very much, all. If you would like to stay for the question, you can. If not, we're happy to continue and see us next time. Thank you very much, all.
Yeah, I would like to stay briefly for the question.
Luis, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I joined the meeting slightly late. Luis Kembi, I'm from Cameroon, and I run an organization called Environment and Rural Development Foundation. So I got involved from the start of this program, but I later on dropped out because of eHealth. And it seems my project was disconnected. I just want to know how we can do to get back.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Luis. It's nice to see you. I hope you're fully recovered. I know you have been seriously sick, so thanks for the question. So the reason why the project is not enabled for donation is like that we had tried to reach to you several times and there was no response. So we had to ensure that everything is going properly. So the project is not disqualified on our platform. It's just a pause for donations because there was no contact and with you anymore. We tried to reach out. So what we can do is I would suggest to start a follow-up call either this week or next week, and then we can easily discuss your participation on the platform.
Okay, no problem. I'll be waiting for an email. I hope you have an email.
Yes, I saw your email recently you sent to us.
Okay.
And in addition, we would like to transfer the donations to your organization as soon as possible. So that's why it is important to schedule the call very soon. So if you have time this week, let us know. I'm sorry. Otherwise, we just postpone to next week.
Yes, I have time this week, so I'm waiting for your invite.
Okay, wonderful. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question?
Not really a question. I just want to say that we too are involved in connectivity conservation. partly restoration, partly protection, and it's a kind of a 600,000 hectares corridor joining two protected areas. So the presentation of PIM was excellent. I just want to comment on it, not really a question. But the one on which we are working for a 15-year restoration program is on highly degraded and fragmented mountain landscape, which definitely poses plenty of challenges with different stakeholders' interests, and needs to bring all of them on board to see the same vision. And just asking, want to know how Treeful Planet could support in that kind of building that kind of a complex and supporting that kind of a complex stakeholder ecosystem.
Thank you, Lewis. This might be a question for Caxton when it comes to our advisory service. If you would like to have Plant for the Planet supporting you financially, this is up to the donations coming through, and in addition, the grant agreements, we could definitely support you.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I'll be waiting for the meeting invite inside this week.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful day and evening.
Same to you. Bye-bye.